The atmosphere carries a biting keenness that penetrates through wool and fur alike, signaling winter's undeniable arrival. Imagine a twilight scene where the land is covered by a thick blanket of snow, disturbed only by the wailing wind, sharing narratives of survival. Roads cease to exist, and fields lie fallow, their previous yield a distant memory. Existence is precarious, reliant on meticulous planning and sheer determination. Fires offer precious warmth, casting dancing shadows on stone walls, as if challenging the cold to breach this fragile refuge. This is the beginning of the story of medieval endurance, an era where the elements were unforgiving and resilience was paramount. Envision yourself entering a world where winter descends with abrupt, relentless force, testing the very limits of human fortitude. Life in medieval times was a complex interaction with nature, a period when the initial snowfall was like an impenetrable barrier, covering the landscape in white and isolating communities. Deprived of guiding roads, families confined to their homes faced the season with a stark understanding that survival depended not only on physical readiness, but on the strength of their spirits. Winter's unexpected onset felt like nature's betrayal, stealing valuable weeks intended for harvest preparation. As the sun receded and days shortened, the unending nights intensified the cold's persistent grip. Winds howled through wooden structures, a constant reminder of nature's overwhelming presence. This ordeal was more than a test of shelter and stored provisions. It was a profound challenge to human resolve, probing the depths of their capacity to endure. For those who persevered through these freezing periods, adaptation was not a choice, but a necessity. As frost settled on the fields, the fate of families was delicately balanced. Agriculture, the foundation of medieval existence, became a struggle for survival as crops withered under the frost's icy hold. Across Europe, from the plains of England to the vineyards of France, the soil represented hope for the following year and the measure of despair when faced with potential crop failure. In this world, fields stood as silent witnesses to the battle between life and death, reminding villagers of lessons learned and, tragically, of sustenance lost to the icy grasp. Medieval communities confronted winter's intense challenge not in isolation, but through a shared spirit of resilience. Survival demanded resistance to nature's harsh trials, a resolve reinforced by tales and strategies exchanged by firelight. Elders, wise from countless winters, shared their knowledge of survival, transforming it into something invaluable against the encroaching cold. Communities bound by necessity faced the lengthening shadows of the winter sun together, fighting not just for life, but for the continuation of their way of life. Isolation intensified with each snowfall. Paths disappeared, leaving villages enclosed in solitude. It was a sobering testament to human vulnerability, emphasizing the absolute need for community unity. Homes, whether grand manors or humble peasant cottages, became like besieged strongholds enveloped by the vast expanse of snow. This physical isolation gave rise to narratives of madness resulting from solitude, stories that weighed on spirits but fortified the mind against the never-ending freeze. Yet alongside the bitter cold, hunger presented a menacing threat. Scarcity governed every decision. Supplies stored in hopeful abundance at the end of autumn were now rationed with desperate precision. Each meal was a careful calculation for survival, a stark reflection of the autumn's yield. Desperation when provisions dwindled sparked innovation. Hunters risked the frozen terrain in pursuit of elusive game, each expedition a gamble with their lives. Families mastered the art of conserving dwindling resources, transforming scraps into meals just sufficient to ward off starvation. Within stone walls, the illusion of a safe haven was tested. Castles and huts alike, once considered formidable, proved fragile against winter's chill. Tapestries and rushes provided meager protection, absorbing dampness more than deflecting cold. Despite their grandeur, noble halls could be as cold as any peasant dwelling, resisting the advance of warmth. Even monarchs found no refuge from the frost's bite, learning humility in the face of nature's impartial cruelty. In winter's domain, all were merely mortals, united in the struggle against the relentless cold. Fire emerged as the great equalizer, a symbol of hope against nature's power. It brought families together, illuminating spaces where warmth and stories revitalized spirits weary from the cold. Every spark was precious, tended with the care given to a newborn. The hearth became a symbol of resistance against winter's dominance. The glow of the fire was a testament to human perseverance. While wood was gathered in a careful balance between availability and need, and layers of wool and fur offered protection against the physical cold, winter was ultimately a test of the human spirit. Minds and bodies alike were subjected to the subtle pressures of endurance, with willpower serving as a shield against despair. Those who maintained hope amidst hardship found strength not in material possessions, but in relationships and beliefs. Under the flickering light of candles, courage was renewed, bonds were strengthened, and the flame of survival was sustained, creating a network of unseen strength. During the somber winter months, medieval communities extracted wisdom from the harsh lessons of survival, basing decisions on nature's rhythms and enriching their lives with an enduring respect for its cycles. By observing the stars, judging the winds, and heeding ancient tales, they developed an understanding that shaped both their identity and their destiny. The promise of spring brought the hope of renewed life awakening beneath the snow, a resurgence that was not just the end of winter, but a celebration of rewarded endurance. As the earth softened and the thaw commenced, the medieval world celebrated the triumph of survival, knowing that no winter endured forever. As the final frosts of spring melted away, medieval villages stirred into action. Summer was not a period for rest, it was a race against an unforgiving deadline. The fields filled with ripening grain, orchards were busy with fruit, and every day was a crucial step towards securing food for the long, harsh winter. The medieval world adhered to a stark principle. Failure to prepare meant being consumed by winter. From dawn to dusk, every capable individual worked tirelessly, even children. The sun dictated their schedule, and there was no time to waste. With each sheaf of wheat, they waged a silent war against starvation. A sense of urgency permeated the air, palpable in the very soil they cultivated. Communal barns gradually filled, and the villages buzzed with the constant sound of the mill grinding grain. Meticulous planning complemented physical labor. Neighbors assisted one another, driven by a shared objective, survival. However, individual families faced their own challenges, as varying yields could determine the difference between life and death. A summer storm or an early frost could shatter hopes. Knowledge passed down through generations played a crucial role, as did superstitions intended to influence nature's favor. Sacrifices, rituals, and prayers became tools used alongside scythes and sickles in an effort to gather enough for the winter. In a world without refrigeration, medieval people were experts in preservation. Salting, smoking, and drying transformed perishable items into durable goods. Salt was highly valued, considered as precious as silver. Meats were salted or smoked to prevent decay. Grains and dried beans, essential winter provisions, were stored in sealed barrels, protecting against moisture and pests. Communal drying racks laden with fish resembled peculiar harvest decorations, while dried fruits served as sweet reminders of sunlit days. Vegetables were fermented or pickled, providing both provisions and vital nutrients, combating the threat of scurvy. Ale brewing was another preservation technique, brewed in summer using surplus grains. Ale, less potent than modern beer but safer than water, was a household staple. Even children consumed low-alcohol ale, as it contained fewer diseases than contaminated water. These demanding processes instilled resilience in medieval life. Each generation transmitted these techniques, safeguarding against hunger with the knowledge gained through arduous work. Community was the cornerstone of medieval survival, and agriculture was no exception. Villages combined resources and labor during this high-pressure season. This collective effort led to greater efficiency and higher yields, essential for winter. Fields under manorial or church control required coordinated efforts, often marked by festivals that promoted both productivity and social cohesion. Communities functioned like well-tuned machines, each person aware of their role in the grand scheme of survival. Beyond agricultural tasks, bartering was essential. In excess of one crop could be exchanged for another type of food or necessary tools. Harvest festivals celebrated the season's bounty and symbolized a respite from winter's cold isolation. Exchanges were not merely about sustenance. They were acts of goodwill among peasants, strengthening community bonds and providing security against the unpredictability of the agricultural cycle. Rich folklore and superstition infused medieval life, serving as spiritual means to ensure abundant harvests. Every stage of the agricultural year had its rituals believed to influence nature in the farmer's favor. Incense, prayers, and charms were as integral to the harvest as scythes. Superstitions held that leaving a portion unharvested would appease the field spirit, ensuring future fertility. Once stored, food was ritually blessed to guard against spoilage or theft by malevolent forces. Legends of spirits protecting granaries reinforced the belief that well-being was linked to forces beyond human control, reminding communities that their survival was as much a spiritual journey as a physical one. Gender roles in labor were clearly defined in medieval times. During the period of stockpiling, men and women contributed equally, but in different ways. Fields were primarily the domain of men, although women participated in haymaking and winnowing. In the domestic sphere, women excelled in preservation, overseeing salting, fermenting, brewing, and drying. Children, guided by their mothers, formed an essential workforce, acquiring life skills alongside basic education. This division was practical rather than restrictive. Each skill complemented the others, contributing to rural stability. Regardless of their roles, labor was shared, and the outcomes were protected against winter's advance. Not every medieval family faced the task of stockpiling equally. For nobles, it meant bustling kitchens and granaries filled with resources collected through taxes. They relied less on communal bonds and more on wealth and ample storage, although rising grain prices could still affect them. Despite wealth, a failed harvest could mean disaster. Famine did not discriminate based on status, and natural disasters impacted everyone. In stark contrast, peasants depended on communal support, trading to supplement their limited reserves. Yet there was an irony. While nobles possessed wealth and access, peasants often developed practical survival wisdom. The lives of nobles could unravel in the face of famine, while rural folk drew resilience from hope and determination, illustrating the complexity of medieval stockpiling. Medieval life was unforgiving, each lesson hard-earned through arduous labor. Failed harvests forced communities to rely on basic survival skills. One poor season instilled lessons in rural governance. Those who had experienced scarcity shared cautionary tales, imbuing advice with wisdom. Redemption sometimes came from unexpected sources. Innovations arose from necessity, not immediate need. Failure became the test of resilience. Bread recipes were adapted to available resources. Ale became stronger amidst threats of disease. Failures taught crucial survival strategies. Ancestral wisdom was whispered through preserved goods, transforming hardship into perseverance. It was a continuous cycle where each scar in each stored jar held stories of survival, grit, and unwavering hope. In medieval Europe, forests were more than just stretches of trees. They were the very source of life. Wood was indispensable, used not only for heating homes, but for cooking meals and constructing the dwellings themselves. In summer, the air resonated with the rhythmic sound of axes striking trees as families worked tirelessly, transforming dense woods into piles of valuable timber. This was not an easy task. It was demanding labor, requiring skill and foresight passed down through generations. Felling a large tree demanded meticulous accuracy. Once trees were brought down, their branches were removed, they were cut into manageable sections, and the bark was often set aside for tanning leather, ensuring that no part was wasted. Stacking the logs correctly was a skilled art. Green wood with its moisture did not burn properly, and wet logs were almost useless. Therefore, it was essential to ensure the wood was thoroughly dried by winter. Logs were carefully arranged to allow air circulation, even stored in barns if space was available. Forests were fiercely protected, not only for their immediate yield but for future generations. Deforestation could necessitate long, difficult journeys to gather more wood, a formidable challenge when winter's icy grip made roads nearly impassable. For many peasants, the luxury of wood was unattainable. Instead, they turned to ancient alternatives like dung and peat. Dried animal dung had been used as fuel for millennia. Children, equipped with small baskets, roamed pastures, searching for these valuable pieces of fuel while learning lessons of frugality and resilience. Dung was shaped into patties and left to dry in the sun, never quite providing the warmth of wood, but essential for maintaining a small flame. Meanwhile, peat was harvested from marshy moors, a hidden treasure of the earth. Cutting peat involved digging out bricks of wet, dense material from the ground, an exhausting process requiring specialized tools like slanes. When dried, these bricks burned steadily, providing long, low heat, crucial for the coldest nights. Even for those who relied on peat and dung, certain professions demanded the unique, intense heat that only charcoal could provide. Blacksmiths, skilled in metalworking tools, armor, and household items, depended on this powerful fuel. The production of charcoal itself was a specialized skill, its practitioners respected for their expertise. It involved burning wood slowly in an environment with limited oxygen, covered with soil or clay, allowing it to smolder for several days. This was not simple burning. It required intuition and patience to produce charcoal that burned longer and hotter than wood, sustaining industries as vital to feudal life as they were demanding. Amidst all these concerns, the hearth was more than just a source of warmth. It was the heart of medieval home life. Around it, meals were cooked, stories were shared, and families found comfort from the cold. As winter's early darkness enveloped villages, the hearth provided not only warmth, but the main source of light. Its soft glow and the comforting crackle of burning wood infused long nights with a sense of security. Maintaining the fire was a constant duty. Allowing it to die down was not an option, as rekindling a fire in the biting cold was a difficult task. In this regard, children learned early the skill of tending embers, sharing the responsibility within the family. Yet as much as fire sustained life, it could also bring destruction. A stray spark could ignite devastating fires, a common threat in villages where thatched roofs and wooden structures were prevalent. In cities like London, the destructive Great Fire of 1212 led to regulations mandating the construction of stone buildings. For those living in areas with limited wood supplies, the delicate balance of conserving fuel while staying warm was a constant struggle. Forests, once abundant and seemingly inexhaustible, became sparse as populations grew, and with them the relentless demand for wood. Entire landscapes were altered, disrupting the natural balance. Timber was more than just fuel. It was a commodity that shaped the economies and politics of medieval Europe. Entire towns established laws governing forestry, recognizing its critical importance. This wood served as a form of currency, driving trade and sometimes conflict, particularly impacting shipbuilding and military campaigns when demand exceeded supply. The class distinction was starkly evident in the distribution of resources. In castles, enormous fireplaces consumed vast quantities of wood, serviced by workers bound by feudal loyalty or obligation. Meanwhile, peasants carefully rationed their meager stack of wood, ensuring that not a single twig was wasted. Communal wood-gathering expeditions strengthened village life, occasions where materials were collected, news was exchanged, and disputes were settled by the fire. These gatherings were not just practical. They were vital for maintaining communal bonds. Ultimately, the medieval relationship with fire and wood has echoes that resonate today. Their practices, born out of necessity and a deep respect for nature, laid the groundwork for what we now consider sustainability. Their survival stands as a testament to resilience, offering us enduring lessons on coexisting with nature and with each other. Their mastery over fuel serves as a guiding ember from the past, reminding us of the timeless beauty in balancing immediate needs with foresight for the winters to come. In the harshest months of a medieval winter, clothing was not merely attire, it was essential for survival. At the core of endurance was wool, the preferred medieval fabric. Its insulating properties made it indispensable for withstanding the bone-chilling cold. Sheep were highly valued not just as livestock, but as providers of fleece so crucial that it was spun into threads finer than spider silk and woven into layers that provided warmth. Every thread woven was a stitch in the fabric of survival, as vital to endurance as food and fire. The necessity for wool transcended class divisions. This humble material bridged the gap between peasants and nobles, although with clear distinctions. While peasants covered themselves in scraps, nobles had the means to fashion the finest wool into elaborate garments, often dyed in rich colors that indicated status but served the same purpose: warmth. Whether one was a laborer layering every available piece of clothing, or a lord or lady wearing fur-lined woolen garments, all were united in a common struggle against the unforgiving cold. Each item, from undergarments to cloaks, trapped essential body heat, forming a protective barrier against the biting air. The common people, limited by their resources, relied on clever layering. Wearing hand-me-downs, patchwork garments became central, assembled from whatever was available. Every garment was a masterpiece born of necessity, sewn with painstaking care from hemp and linen to every valuable scrap of wool. These garments, passed down through generations, conveyed stories of enduring hardship and ingenuity. At social gatherings, villagers might engage in bartering, exchanging, and sharing clothing to enhance their collective resilience, each patch and stitch reinforcing bonds of survival through shared adversity. For the wealthier, layers were not just about necessity, but luxury. The nobility adorned themselves with furs like sable, symbols of long trade routes and tokens of affluence. Sumptuous cloaks, gowns lined with pelts and furs, offered unparalleled warmth and reflected the social hierarchy even as they battled the same cold. Yet despite the extravagance, castles with drafty stone halls often meant that even the wealthy could not entirely escape the chill, reminding them that winter did not discriminate. The craft of tailoring played a crucial role, combining artistry with practical necessity. Tailors and seamstresses, with their skillful hands and attention to detail, were essential in creating clothing that could withstand nature's fury. Every cut and seam was carefully planned to make the most of scarce materials, a vital skill during lean times. These artisans, with their legacy of craftsmanship, ensured that communities could collectively prepare against winter's assault. Essential accessories like mittens, hats, and scarves, though seemingly simple, were vital in the battle against the cold. Knitting circles became community events as families worked together to create these crucial items, each one conserving precious body heat. Mittens trapped air around hands prone to chilling, while woolen caps protected heads from losing warmth. Scarves or shawls added extra layers of insulation, strengthening defenses against the creeping cold. Even in these small details, individuality was evident as families wove unique patterns passed down through generations, embedding identity into warmth. Footwear, often overlooked, was paramount. Durable and insulating boots were crafted with care, their soles lined with straw for insulation against the frozen ground. Leather, a common material across all classes, provided the outer layer, enduring the harsh terrain. Moss, for those near forests, added further insulation, cushioning feet from the relentless cold. For nobles, fur-lined boots offered even greater comfort. Wealth juxtaposed against practicality in this shared struggle for survival. Each step taken in these boots was a reminder of the skill and care invested in their creation. As winter progressed, repairing clothing became a life-saving art. Every patch stitched by the fire was an act of resilience, extending the life of garments damaged by the elements. Families gathered to mend and share tips in a communal effort to maintain warmth. Amidst the repetitive task, stories and shared difficulties were woven into the fabric, turning every stitch into a symbol of hope and continuity, a legacy passed down through generations. The tapestry of medieval life was also enriched by regional variations. Northern Europe, with its intense cold, required heavier garments and more furs, while the milder Mediterranean climates saw wool combined with lighter materials, adapted to their unique yet challenging winters. These regional styles not only provided warmth, but reflected cultural identities, a living testament to the fusion of tradition and necessity. Finally, clothing during this period represented more than just physical protection. It offered psychological armor against the bitter environment. Wrapping oneself in wool and fur was a form of defiance, a ritual that united communities in a shared resistance to the cold. The familiarity of textures, the ritual of putting on these layers, and the shared efforts to prepare against the harshness outside formed a tapestry of communal support. Layers not only of fabric but of faith, these clothing practices left a legacy that resonates in our modern wardrobes. Wool, the staple of medieval life, remains essential to winter fashion today. The medieval art of layering has been reinterpreted, combining function with style, yet its origins are deeply intertwined with that ancient dance of survival. Even the practice of repairing garments is experiencing a resurgence. now a nod to sustainability in contemporary times. The threads of the past continue to weave through the fabric of modern life, a poignant reminder of resilience, humanity, and the enduring challenge of winter's embrace. In the medieval winter, survival was a matter of skillfully overcoming the biting cold. Homes, whether humble cottages or grand manors, were transformed into strongholds against the relentless frost. Peasant cottages, often built from wattle and daub, lacked the imposing grandeur of castles, but were examples of practical design. Straw-thatched roofs trapped heat inside, while timber-framed walls provided necessary stability. From the outside, these homes appeared fragile, yet inside they were lifelines, protecting families from the chill that loomed like a ghost beyond their doors. The design elements, honed over generations through trial and error, focused on retaining every precious bit of warmth. For the wealthier, stone manors and castles offered thick, seemingly impenetrable walls that ironically could be chillingly cold. The stone absorbed winter's breezes, making it constantly difficult to warm these expansive structures. Tapestries adorned the walls, serving not only as displays of wealth, but as essential tools for insulation and trapping heat within the cavernous halls. On the stone floors, rushes provided insulation and practicality, offering both warmth and cushioning. This continuous battle against the elements shaped a way of life. Whether modest or stately, every home was a sanctuary, a barrier against the unforgiving winter. Preparing a medieval home for winter was an intense communal effort, often beginning months before the first snow. Cracks in walls and doors were systematically filled with rags, moss, and rushes to ward off the penetrating drafts eager to enter. Windows, a rare luxury, were small openings. Those who had them often covered them with oiled parchment or wooden shutters to keep out the cold. While insulation was not yet a science, survival instincts were sharp. Every tiny gap that could lose warmth was a potential threat to life. Thus, preparations were communal, fostering close-knit communities. Knowledge and materials were shared among neighbors who helped one another fortify homes against both cold and intruders. Skills in constructing home barriers were passed down from one generation to the next. Inside, fires burned slowly and steadily, conserving precious fuel as the hearth served as the vital center of family life. Its flickering glow against the sealed walls was more than just a source of warmth. It was a protection against the shadows outside. However, heating and cooking within these small, tightly sealed spaces came at a cost. Smoke and soot. Most homes lacked chimneys to expel smoke. Instead, roofs had smoke holes, often blocked by snow or thatch, leaving rooms filled with air heavy with soot. It was a dilemma. Opening windows allowed fresh air, but brought the deadly chill. So most endured the smoke. Amidst this smoky atmosphere, life continued. Children played, adults cooked and conversed, and the elderly huddled near the fire. While it presented health challenges, breathing difficulties and illnesses were common burdens exacted by winter. The hearth was central, like a sun-dispelling shadows in those smoky stone and timber fortresses. As winter gripped the medieval world, living spaces blurred the lines between humans and animals. Barns attached to cottages sheltered livestock, creating a symbiotic relationship for survival. The warmth of the animals transformed barns into vital resources. Cows, chickens, and sheep were not merely sources of food and labor. They were companions against the shared hardships of the season. Noise and sanitation challenges arose as the shuffling of hooves and clucking of hens became the winter soundtrack. Straw served a dual purpose, providing both bedding and insulation, but also required diligent cleanliness. Sleep became a calculated effort for preservation. Families huddled close, making beds near the hearth and piling on every available blanket, skin, or fur. Beyond comfort, these arrangements were practical exercises in retaining heat. Shared body warmth was a valuable defense against the frigid night air. The concept of personal space was replaced by a communal survival instinct. The hearth dictated sleeping arrangements, with family members positioning themselves according to vulnerability, from the elderly closest to the flame to the children and younger adults on the edges, forming a protective circle. Tangible layers of fabric also played a vital role. Tapestries did more than decorate. They insulated, hanging on walls as barriers to drafts. Their dense threads trapped air, transforming grand halls from icy corridors into nearly habitable spaces. Rushes covered the floors, providing warmth, absorbing spills, and being easily replaced. Herbs woven among them added aroma and medicinal properties. Tapestries and rushes represented the medieval line of defense against winter, a battleground of layers upon layers blocking the cold's advance. The hearth at the heart of the home provided sustenance, security, warmth, and was a social hub. Its crackling fire filled the home with light and warmth, promising heat against the relentless cold outside. Maintaining the hearth required constant effort. The fire's warmth was fleeting, its flames a symbol of defiance. Each log was carefully placed, tended throughout the night, a shared vigilant task among household members. But winter's harshness brought unpredictable dangers. Intruders, dark nights, posed threats from thieves, bandits, or rival factions. Entrances were fortified with heavy wooden doors and iron fastenings. Windows shielded with thick fabric or wooden shutters became barriers against unwelcome guests. Communities organized patrols or relied on trusted watchmen to signal any disturbance, their cries rippling warnings across snowbound hamlets. Despite often being associated with stagnation, medieval times saw innovation. Homes built with survival in mind exhibited clever design adaptations, such as south-facing orientations to capture the limited winter sun. Knowledge of construction materials and techniques was shared, creating strongholds against the harsh climate. Winter was more than just survival. In the icy mirror of medieval life, homes became solitary kingdoms, casting flames that fostered introspection, bonding, and deep-rooted community lessons. Each winter endured was a legacy of wisdom, teaching resilience and shaping identity. A triumph born from necessity as fires burned in defiance, keeping the promise of spring alive in the heart of hardship. Medieval winters were less a season and more a persistent adversary. The cold was not merely a matter of discomfort, but a harsh judge preying on already weakened bodies. Scarcity of fresh fruits and vegetables led to nutritional deficiencies that compromised immune systems, particularly among peasants with limited access to adequate food stores. The lack of vitamin C left many vulnerable to scurvy, turning wounds into persistent sores and opening the door to more deadly illnesses. In this harsh climate, minor injuries or simple colds could insidiously develop into life-threatening conditions. Frostbitten skin often succumbed to infection, untreated coughs escalated to pneumonia, and the basic, often superstitious medical practices offered little comfort. Illnesses were shrouded in mystery and fear, with many viewing them as divine punishment or the work of malevolent spirits. In this era of ignorance, a simple shiver could be an ominous sign, a chilling reminder of nature's unpredictable wrath. As the snow deepened, establishing a monotonous grip on the landscape, the already limited food reserves diminished rapidly. This seasonal scarcity transformed routine days into a silent, insidious countdown. Starvation was a constant threat, its shadow long and dark. Communities, their resilience tested, counted each passing day against their dwindling supplies. Those unable to manage or store sufficient provisions during the abundant seasons found their survival hanging by a thread as hunger weakened their bodies and disease took hold. Vulnerable groups like children, the elderly, and the sick were typically the first to succumb in this seasonal culling. The daily diet of grains and preserved meats became monotonous and meager. Driven by desperation, some foraged for roots or acorns in the frozen earth. While their ingenuity in survival tactics was impressive, these efforts merely delayed the inevitable, offering little relief. Starvation-induced illnesses like kwashiorkor, though unnamed at the time, were grim realities. The search for sustenance became both a means of survival and a torment, preserving life while offering no true escape from the relentless cycle of hunger and sickness. Preserving food was a vital skill honed over generations, yet even the most diligent could fall prey to contamination. Lacking modern preservation methods, errors in salting meats or fermenting vegetables allowed bacteria to thrive. Consuming such tainted provisions was a dangerous gamble, often introducing illnesses like dysentery into the home. These modest medieval dwellings, cramped and poorly ventilated, were fertile breeding grounds for diseases. Once one person fell ill, others soon followed, with a cozy hearth transforming into a crucible for shared suffering. People believed in the protective power of certain foods. Garlic and onions were not just ingredients, but talismans warding off evil influences. Despite such protective beliefs, hygiene was poor, and knowledge of disease control was almost non-existent. Amidst the desperate conservation of meager resources lay an invisible threat, ready to exploit any oversight and turn life-saving provisions into instruments of death. As temperatures plummeted, both people and livestock huddled together under thatched roofs, seeking refuge and warmth in shared spaces. These dwellings, though necessary for conserving heat, paradoxically became prisons where respiratory diseases flourished. Flames in cramped quarters caused soot to cling to the rafters, mixing with the chilly air and worsening respiratory ailments. With ventilation considered a luxury, open windows were an impractical dream. Warmth was prioritized at the expense of fresh air. As family members wore unwashed layers for weeks, warmth and comfort were counterbalanced by increasing discomfort and disease, a testament to the relentless tension between survival and sickness. The most vulnerable, infants and the elderly, became winter's primary victims. Babies with fragile immune systems could barely fend off infections, while the elderly, worn down by years of labor and hardship, found it difficult to ward off the chill. The death of these individuals was not just a family tragedy, but a disruption that resonated across communities, as each loss threatened social stability and economy. Every death left communities vulnerable. Roles were reassigned and traditions were altered in sudden and often painful ways. Burials, the final rite for the deceased, were often delayed. The earth, frozen solid like iron, resisted efforts to lay the dead to rest. Corpses, wrapped simply in shrouds, awaited the thaw in barns or outbuildings. Superstitions persisted. Souls were believed to wander until they could be properly interred. This delay in ritual compounded the grief, intertwined with acceptance, and the vague fear of unfulfilled spiritual obligations. As soon as the sun restored the soil's pliability, neighbors would gather for grave-digging efforts, completing the dreaded formality of death and etching another name onto the communal memory. In these times, medieval medicine often offered more solace than cure. Wisdom from monks and midwives transformed herbs into remedies. Ginger and mint treated digestive problems. Mugwort and willow bark provided relief. Still, medicinal offerings were intertwined with mysticism. Bloodletting and strange charms were used to ward off illness, curious mixtures of rudimentary medicine and faith. Healing was, in some ways, a communal effort, as much about whispered prayer as about herbal cures, blending faith with fragile lifelines against the unknown. As winter cast its long shadow over the medieval world, each life claimed by its harshness was like a stone dropped into a communal pond, creating ripples that reshaped social landscapes. Every empty cradle, every vacant chair, echoed through seasons long after the thaw. These memories shaped folk tales that warned and instructed, planting seeds of resilience through shared cultural wisdom. Ultimately, despite being the silent reaper, winter imparted vital lessons to life, spurring innovation and resilience against its relentless cycle. It was a formidable force, forging strong wills against the lashing winds, weaving its profound legacy into the tapestry of human endurance. As the sun disappeared below the horizon earlier and earlier, medieval people found themselves enveloped in a darkness that was as much psychological as physical. Night stretched on endlessly, creating fertile ground for fear and imagination to flourish. In this absence of light, unseen forces seemed to become active, and the medieval mind filled the void with spirits and malevolent beings. Darkness was not merely the absence of light. It became a tangible presence that heavily influenced the psyche, fostering a lingering dread. Under winter's veil, every creaking timber or gust of wind might signal the approach of sinister forces. Without the protection of light, fear was a constant companion, giving rise to tales that persisted even after winter's chill subsided. The night was a realm where superstition held sway, blurring the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural. Stories of witches and goblins were woven into the fabric of winter life, each retelling adding depth and detail. These tales were not fiction, but cautionary accounts rooted in belief and supposed encounters. Nightfall brought the invocation of charms and protections, acts of defiance against unseen but deeply felt terrors. Through such stories, people sought to explain their world, creating a battlefield between light and darkness. Winter was more than just a season. It symbolized a transition into the realm of the dead. As snow covered the earth, life paused, mirroring the silence of the grave. The belief in restless spirits, particularly those who had died tragically or without proper rites, thrived in this eerie stillness. Such spirits were seen as instigators of misfortune, seemingly unaffected by the cold earth. To protect themselves, medieval people engaged in rituals, sharing tales of ghostly processions and apparitions, warning of the vigilance required against these ethereal intruders. The snowy landscapes mirrored these legends, contrasting the safety of hearths with the uncertainties of the outer darkness. Perhaps no figure loomed larger in the medieval imagination during the dark months than the witch. Winter forests became fertile ground for tales of women communicating with dark forces. The witch symbolized the fear of the unknown that long nights awakened. Accusations of witchcraft surged. Witch hunts arose not solely from superstition, but from a need to assert control. The archetype of the witch fed on societal fears, intertwining gender, power, and anxiety. Winter lore surrounding witches drew from real threats like illness and crop failure, reinforcing the narrative of folklore. To counter the enveloping darkness, people turned to practices rooted in faith and folklore. Bells were rung to purify the air, their sound driving away spirits, creating sacred spaces where evil could not endure. Charms made from stones, herbs, and sacred inscriptions were placed around homes, serving as shields against misfortune. Midnight prayers were whispered with intensity, imploring divine protection against the specters of the night. These practices highlighted the resilience of tradition, reflecting a world deeply embedded in the belief in divine intervention against darkness's hold. During these long winters, the church emerged as a symbol of hope, employing its own narrative tools to counter superstition. Liturgical ceremonies filled with meaning offered divine intervention in communities overshadowed by fear. Calendars of feasts marked the passage of time, providing spiritual anchors amidst the long hours of darkness. Church bells called believers to seek higher truths. Yet within the church, the line between sanctioned faith and folklore could blur. Narratives of saints performing miracles mirrored beliefs in spirits, both integrating into the medieval winter landscape. Through this interplay of divine decree and folklore, the church strengthened its influence. Medieval winters generated a rich tapestry of storytelling, both oral and written, inscribing fears and hopes into historical records. Chronicles and manuscripts reflect more than just fear of spirits or witches. They document society's interaction with darkness. Writers wove eerie elements into allegories and parables to entertain and educate. Tales preserved on parchment reveal societal dynamics more accurately than simple records. They convey a darkness fraught with danger and doctrine, oscillating between mortal perils and moral lessons. The legacy of storytelling that emerged from winter's embrace became a mirror through which the medieval world understood itself. For medieval people, superstition was interconnected with the environment, imbuing everyday objects with protective narratives. Amulets were not inert items but were charged with meaning and power. Iron was used to ward off spirits suspended above doorways. Mundane items like salt became mystical agents, repelling spirits as they preserved food. Rowan branches protected gardens from spirits. Broomsticks were crossed outside homes to deter witches. This daily integration of superstition demonstrated deep creativity, revealing that survival was as much about managing the unseen as battling natural elements. Amidst these beliefs, pockets of skepticism emerged. Individuals dared to question the dogmas that held sway during winter's long nights. Skeptics risked accusations of heresy, but were crucial in demonstrating an underlying current of doubt. Through writings and observations, they sowed skepticism that would later flourish. Often, skepticism was expressed through humor or literature, allowing for self-mockery while raising critical questions. These skeptics showed that medieval belief systems were not solely based on fear, demonstrating curiosity and even courageous defiance of established norms. Navigating medieval winter was as much an internal struggle as an external challenge. Superstition permeated the mind, intertwining with personal belief systems. People lived with cognitive dissonance, reconciling fears with doctrine and experience. This process strengthened communal identity and sometimes inspired innovative approaches to winter's challenges. Shared experiences created a symbiotic relationship between mind and spirit, with fear acting as a catalyst for unity. Neighbors or clerics offered refuge, helping to alleviate fears with collective hope. Fear was a catalyst for community, fostering solace in shared experience and maintaining social cohesion amidst fear of the unseen. Medieval winter's darkness has shaped a narrative arc that captures human resilience, demonstrating the capacity to rise above when surrounded by relentless shadows. In the midst of the unrelenting medieval winter, a period marked by scarcity and struggle, feast days emerged as symbols of warmth and unity, providing a rare break from the monotony with communal joy. These occasions were deeply embedded in the fabric of the season, serving not only as religious observances, but as vital components of social life. Gatherings on feast days allowed communities to come together, offering a temporary escape from the hardship of surviving the harsh cold. These celebrations held the promise of spiritual renewal while strengthening bonds among people who otherwise faced isolation in a world where the cold could easily extinguish hope. The medieval world was characterized by strict hierarchies, yet feast days remarkably blurred these boundaries. Nobles and peasants, albeit temporarily, shared in the joy of the occasion, reminding everyone of their interconnected lives. Even in the grandest stone halls or the simplest village squares, the shared warmth and laughter provided relief from the bitter cold and hunger. Such days were a comfort to the soul, as they revitalized not only bodies with food and drink, but spirits too, by fostering a brief but powerful sense of community and connection. Consider Yule, for instance, a festival with roots in pagan rituals, but later incorporated into Christian traditions. Celebrated around the winter solstice, Yule was a time when people marked the return of the sun. This annual event was more than just a natural occurrence. It was viewed as a mystical transformation, a miracle that offered hope in the heart of winter's darkness. Rituals such as lighting fires and candles were central, symbolizing the rebirth of light and warmth in a frozen world. The Christian adaptation layered these celebrations with spiritual meanings, decorating homes with evergreen boughs, a reminder of eternal life, and burning Yule logs to ward off evil spirits. Christmas in the Middle Ages combined solemnity with festivity. It was a time of religious observance and a feast day of abundance. Tables groaned under the weight of whatever each household could provide, whether roasted meats, rich pies, or freshly baked bread, a stark contrast to the meager menus of the preceding months. In wealthier homes, the spread was more lavish, but even the poorest households found a way to participate in the celebration, ensuring that the villagers shared the bounty of collective labor. Christmas Mass was an occasion of grandeur and solemnity, with churches filled with hymns, ringing bells, and the spectacle of nativity plays. Here, the gospel narrative of Christ bringing light to the world resonated with deeply personal hope, contrasted with village squares alive with dances, games, and the spirit of festive community. Epiphany, which occurred on January 6th and marked the conclusion of the 12 days of Christmas, was another important feast day. It commemorated the visit of the Magi to Christ, symbolizing a journey from darkness to light. This final burst of celebration ushered people back into their daily routines, but not before emphasizing themes of revelation and kinship. Traditions like the King's Cake, where a hidden being crowned the lucky finder as king for a day, embodied a spirit of equality. Epiphany rituals reinforced communal bonds, promising that spring was just beyond winter's peak. The church's influence during these celebrations was profound, serving as both a unifying force and a provider of shelter and sustenance amidst the harshness of the season. Churches became sanctuaries, their architecture embracing congregants in warmth and faith. Feasts were often accompanied by acts of charity, with the clergy ensuring that food reached those most in need. In this way, the church nurtured both spiritual and physical resilience, making feast days essential markers on the winter calendar. Central to feast days were the sensory pleasures of food and drink. Unlike the everyday pottage and stale bread, feasts featured the best that winter could offer. Villagers roasted pigs or sheep over open fires, while the communal oven baked savory bread. Ale and wine flowed freely, igniting warmth and joy in these gatherings. This abundance symbolized resilience and hope. Each dish a promise of better days ahead, a tangible reminder of divine provision and prosperity. Music and storytelling animated these gatherings, their sounds filling rooms with the rich tapestry of shared histories and myths. Minstrels sang tales of heroism and folklore, while villagers recited stories of saints and legendary figures, creating vivid pictures from memory in the absence of written records or screens. Meanwhile, dancing transformed courtyards and halls into lively spaces of physical expression. Whether graceful and courtly or wild and spirited, dance provided an emotional release, a break from the winter monotony. Light used throughout these winter celebrations held deep significance. The glow of candles and the blaze of bonfires symbolized life and hope, dispelling darkness and drawing people together. These lights, whether in grand halls or humble homes, indicated hospitality and resilience, softening nature's harshness. Fires marked a shared defiance against the cold, a collective warmth, metaphorically and physically emphasizing community spirit. In every sense, these feast days underscored the importance of belonging. They fused the spiritual with the social, creating gatherings that offered protection against the bitter isolation of winter. By breaking down barriers and promoting inclusivity, they reminded everyone present that no matter how formidable the season, hope and humanity remained intertwined, resilient against the cold. Feasting together planted the seeds for cooperation and camaraderie, essential as communities endured winter's persistent grip, transforming survival into a shared act of defiance and communion. As February approached medieval villages, the hopeful anticipation of spring began to be overshadowed by the grim reality of diminishing supplies. Known as the famine months, this period was a test of endurance that pushed the limits of human survival. The reserves carefully accumulated over the previous seasons proved insufficient as cellar shelves emptied and larders became bare. Survival became a matter of rationing, with families measuring each meal as if it might be their last. Bread was made with more chaff and less grain, stretching resources but providing little in the way of nourishment. As hunger gnawed at them, people learned the art of making do with less, finding ways to extend what remained and avoiding waste. Despite their efforts, not everyone survived these harrowing months. Starvation and malnutrition took their toll, leading to weakened immune systems and increased susceptibility to diseases. The elderly, the young, and the sick were the most vulnerable, often succumbing to the bitter effects of hunger and the relentless cold that persisted despite the promise of approaching warmth. Communities were tightly bound by the shared struggle for survival. Families and neighbors pooled whatever resources they had. But this unity was often not enough to save everyone, and the lasting memories of those lost during the famine months deeply scarred the survivors. These were the stories passed down through generations, reminders of winter's unpredictable cruelty and the hard-won lessons of endurance. By early March, the ground, though still partially frozen, began to hint at renewal. Yet the reality was that until the first shoots and blooms appeared, foraging was a desperate undertaking, its success heavily influencing each family's survival. In the meager thaw, villagers searched woods and wilderness alike for anything remotely edible. For the rural poor, knowledge of the land was essential. Understanding which buds were safe, which roots could be consumed, and which wild herbs might alleviate the worst of hunger was invaluable. Survival lore passed down from generation to generation, edible roots, nuts stored by squirrels, the early growth of certain herbs. All became precious discoveries in the bleakness of late winter. Foraging expeditions were not without their dangers. A weakened body had little resistance to the elements during the extended hours spent outside, and the scarcity of resources also increased the risk of consuming something toxic in desperation. Yet these excursions also offered moments of hope and discovery. A mother finding a cache of wild onions or a child stumbling upon a patch of hardy dandelions could mean the difference between life and death. Tales of courageous foraging journeys became folklore, with heroes and heroines emerging in stories told by the hearthside, reminding everyone of past shared hardships and the communal spirit needed to survive them. As fragile signs of life began to emerge from the earth, hope mingled with hunger in an uneasy embrace. By March, the salt barrels stored in damp cellars often contained little more than brine. The remaining salted meat had become shriveled remnants edged with crystals, the last vestiges of summer's bounty. Families would gather around tables to share uneven portions, chewing slowly on the tough food to prolong the sensation of fullness. The salted meat was a reminder of the better times of autumn, when they had slaughtered livestock with the awareness of the long months ahead. The preservation of meat and salt was simultaneously a lifesaver and a monotonous reminder of life's fragility during winter's dominance. While the salted meats were intended to last as long as possible, the preservation methods were far from perfect. Without modern sanitation practices, contamination by mold and spoilage was common, adding another layer of risk to consumption. This ancient survival preparation became a gamble between warding off starvation and succumbing to illness. People had to make calculated decisions, trusting their senses to determine if the preserved food was safe to eat. The gritty texture and salty taste were far from gourmet, but stories of success and caution surrounded the communal act of sharing these meals. The salted flesh symbolized a collective resolve, the will to endure, and the sheer determination to survive the unspoken threats of winter. By April, homes held the ghostly echoes of once roaring hearths. The ample stores of wood that had fueled fires throughout the cold months had dwindled to remnants. The once daily chore of feeding the fire became a silent test of endurance. With wood scarce and winter's chill still present, fuel was conserved only for the coldest nights. Villagers poked ashes, rekindled dwindling embers, and improvised by burning scraps and salvaged twigs. A cold hearth meant more than discomfort. It was a lurking threat, capable of quickly worsening the fragile health of anyone. Cold hearths forced families closer together, sometimes for warmth, but often in a shared effort for survival. Bodies huddled together became living blankets, shared warmth providing some measure of comfort against the persistent cold. Yet for peasants who lacked sturdy shelters, whose homes were more flimsy than fortresses, enduring these months was especially taxing. On the other hand, wealthier families secluded in stone homes also faced the penetrating chill in hallways and drafty chambers. Between the rich and the poor, the appeal of fire was universal. Its dying embers, a poignant symbol of winter's fading but still powerful grip. Each unlit hearth marked the resilience of those who faced the season's final challenge, and shared shivers bonded communities as closely as shared laughter once spring's arrival beckoned. In towns clustered around ancient churches and villages nestled in forest clearings, the relentless rhythm of enduring winter forged bonds of mutual support within communities. By April, a fragile hope ignited in the hearts of those who had withstood winter's trials. Community ties, too, were reinforced by mutual aid. Those with more helped those with less, and communal resources, such as the church's stores, were distributed among the neediest. Though silent sacrifices went unacknowledged, they were evident in the deeper lines of weariness on the faces of villagers. Everyone united under a shared spirit of survival. Collective action, mutual assistance, and resilience characterized these communities during the harshest days. Rituals, gatherings, and feasts throughout the colder months had provided opportunities for people to convene, exchange stories, and reaffirm communal bonds. By understanding that no individual faced nature's unpredictable might alone, they created a tapestry of shared resilience. Although the harsh realities of medieval society often highlighted divisions based on power and wealth, the final months of winter served as reminders of shared humanity and the trials that affected commoners as well as the noble classes. The echoes of shared survival lingered long into the coming warm months, a powerful reminder that unity brings strength. The landscape, still bearing the memory of frost, slowly released its icy grip in April, bringing hope with each patch of softened earth. As warmer air began to touch the frost-hardened land, families prepared for a ritual as old as time itself, planting the seeds for the next year's sustenance. The thawing soil was a sign of renewal and rebirth. In each turned clump of earth, Medieval families saw not only the promise of greenery and abundance, but tangible proof of having survived another bleak winter. While spring signaled hope, it was tempered by uncertainty. The struggles of the previous season weighed heavily on the minds of those returning to the fields. Storms could still damage crops, just as drought could scorch them later. Thus, sowing the fields, while a time for celebration, was also a test of courage and a challenge to the spirit's optimism after a season of scarcity. Families relied heavily on traditional knowledge, the wisdom passed down by elders, the correct time to plant each crop, the methods to ensure the soil's fertility returned. As the earth yielded its chill, seeds were placed with whispered blessings, confident that survival depended on both natural cycles and human hope intertwined. As spring enveloped the land in shades of green, echoes of the harrowing famine months faded into memory, though not forgotten. The struggle against the frozen hardships of winter had forged a distinct resilience, and the reverence for food and warmth had instilled habits that would persist through the gentle months of summer. Every budding plant was a reminder of the precarious grasp on survival that marked the preceding winter. This period of replenishment and growth, however, was also a time for somber reflection, acknowledging the ordeal that had shaped and strengthened bonds within the community. Spring was thus a bittersweet return to life, a contrast between past deprivation and new abundance. While it inspired stories shared at evening gatherings, these tales were dominated as much by themes of gratitude as of warning, shedding light on both the scarcity endured and the abundance now beginning to appear in the fields. Echoes of shared struggle and survival lingered in the hearts of those who had emerged from winter's depths, instilling a sense of humility in the face of nature's power. The relief of spring not only revitalized the body, but rekindled the spirit, a renewal deeply rooted in the collective resolve to endure whatever trials nature might dispense. Spring's arrival was announced by a series of rituals that went beyond mere agriculture, reaching deep into the spiritual fabric of medieval life. For many, the turning of the seasons marked not only a physical, but a spiritual renewal. Dances were performed to usher in fertility, rituals were held in communal fields to invite generous yields, and ceremonies were conducted to honor divine favors sought during the dark of winter. These rituals affirmed a deeper connection to the cyclical rhythms of life, blending the sacred with everyday existence. Deeply embedded in these rituals was a fervent gratitude for nature's hand turning towards benevolence once more. Ceremonies were as practical as they were sacred. Celebrating the changing rhythms of life ensured another cycle. Local clergy often participated, residents gathering for masses that combined prayers with seasonal invocations. The churches, which had long served as bastions of refuge during the chill, opened their doors wide for processions and communal offerings on sacred ground. Participation in these ceremonies was seen as reinforcing not only the earthly bonds between nature and those dependent upon it, but as actively binding communities closer through shared practice and joyous hope for fruitful days to come. With April's arrival, the exhausted populace emerged determinedly into the fields. Driven by both desperation and hope, the retreating grip of winter revealed fields that promised longed-for abundance. Yet these fields bore the grim marks of the frost's imprint. Regrowth was the theme of the coming months. As children chased through the newly green patches and adults turned soil with robust determination, memories of the cold were gradually replaced by songs of sowing and laughter carried on warmer breezes. Yet returning to the fields demanded more than physical labor, for it required a spirit unburdened by fear. The horror of harsh winters past instilled in recurrent cycles a keen awareness that each planting was as much a gamble as a necessity, deeply ingrained as it was in an agrarian society that relied heavily on hope. As fields became covered with new sowings, villages came alive with shared labors. The planting season, a rite of rebirth and renewal, was embraced communally. Filled silos and growing barns would be the ultimate source of restoration, a testament to resilience and effort against the backdrop of nature's impartial rigor. And as days lengthened, each sunlit hour brought closer the assurance of harvest yet to unfold. By spring's end, both the landscape and the populace were irrevocably shaped by the winter months they had endured. The scars born both physically and within memory held stories and lessons as valuable as any harvest. lessons to prepare for winters yet to come. The endurance displayed during the famine months fostered a wisdom that was woven through the tapestry of medieval life. Tales imparted through oral tradition or taught by elders to the young in villages that seemed to endure nature's whims throughout the years. These tales, often poignant and delivered with a seriousness befitting their hard-earned truths, served as authorities on survival, guiding lights through the uncharted corridors of changing seasons. They illustrated the marks of frost, the resilience of the spirit, and the undeniable power of a shared struggle against the capriciousness of nature. So too did they weave a folklore rich in moral teachings, emphasizing virtues such as prudence, ingenuity, and mutual reliance. From around every hearth, these stories were carried forth as gentle reminders that while the grip of each passing winter was formidable, survival was rooted in knowledge, community, and steadfast perseverance. In their retelling, history resonated with the haunting echoes of endurance that ensured no twilight found them unprepared for the cold once more. In the medieval landscape of Europe, summer was not merely a respite. It was a contrast to the ominous specter of winter. Summers brought warmth and abundance, yet the shadow of the colder months lingered vividly in the minds of both peasants and nobles alike. It was not just the chill that remained, but the vivid recollections of the biting winds and biting scarcity that shaped their every action. Emotions tied to winter were complex, woven into tales told by the fire of families lost to the relentless cold and frost creeping into homes as if it were a stealthy thief. These were more than stories. They were the collective consciousness of an era where the whispering ghosts of winter's past always hovered at the edge of thought, urging a community bound by caution and preparation. As these towns and villages thawed under the temporary sun, their routines and traditions bore witness to winter's indelible mark. Medieval literature echoed the season as both foe and teacher in countless sagas, depicting winter as a beast that demanded cunning and alliances to overcome. Superstitions flourished in this precarious climate. Amulets and sacred herbs became talismans, warding off the biting cold, reflecting a desire to assert some semblance of control over nature's untamed drama. Gatherings provided forms disguised as folklore, where shared survival strategies became the pearls of wisdom passed down through time. It was here that winter's grip on the imagination transformed community intelligence into a bulwark against future chills. Winter's economy turned necessity into innovation. The relentless season shaped agricultural cycles, where rotations and diversification became vital lifelines. Villages pooled resources, trading salt and timber like currencies brought to life by winter's touch. As the season of scarcity inflated food prices, creativity took root. Storage technology advanced, laying the cornerstone for agricultural progress. Skills of negotiation and bartering emerged as indispensable tools forged in the relentless furnace of winter's grasp. This adaptability taught that shifting with nature's rhythms led to resilience deeply ingrained in daily life. Social structures, too, were forged under winter's demands. The feudal hierarchy drew tighter bonds during cold months, creating dependencies between lords and peasants. Mutual reliance strengthened feudal bonds amidst adversity, each class understanding that the survival of the whole depended on unified effort. Winters dictated social norms. Weddings were carefully timed to coincide with harvests, and childbirths were planned with climatic considerations to maximize productivity. Religious rituals emerged, reinforcing unity and offering comfort, a shared warmth in cold echoing halls, enhancing social cohesion across class divides. Architecture stood as a testament to winter's endured. Houses featured functional designs with steep roofs to shed snow and thick walls to ward off cold winds. Wood and stone became allies against the cold within every modest peasant home, each with features designed for warmth. Grander estates used tapestries as shields against icy drafts, while granaries overflowed with stores for the barren months. Communal storage barns were built in larger settlements, ensuring food security and weaving a network of adaptation. Architectural ingenuity carved a memory of struggle and survival, echoing through time with each stone laid for warmth's sake. Psychologically, winter's past left deep imprints on the medieval psyche, a constant chilling companion. More than mere seasons, these were periods when hardship sharpened resilient spirits amidst an ever-present threat. Fear and hope corresponded to nature's whims, compelling societies towards a deterministic worldview. Children effectively learned from elders' tales of survival, adopting resourceful approaches echoed throughout life's challenges and triumphs. Tales reinforced communal fortitude, teaching adults to harmonize with nature's rhythms as winter narratives shaped the culture of endurance. Faith, too, stood firm against winter's relentless siege, offering solace in sacred spaces. Here, churches became sanctuaries of light and warmth, tangible reminders of divine providence amidst nature's harsh theater. Candles gleamed in frigid chapels as symbols of hope, casting shadows back against the encroaching darkness. Spiritual sustenance bound communities together, transcending material shortages with holy day celebrations and eves infused with divine grace. Faith was more than just religion. It formed a channel for human tenacity against winter's tyranny. Yet winter's hardships taught other lessons. Scarcity spurred creativity in agriculture and gastronomy. Every frugal recipe became an invention born of survival. Each famine food a cornerstone of ingenuity. Scarcity sparked innovations in farming methods and recipes. Ensuring sustenance through lean months relied on tradition. These lessons intertwined technical knowledge and experiential growth across generations. A nurturing of culture that persisted as the snow melted and new shoots appeared. Oral histories unfolded, weaving threadbare tales of memory into communal tapestries. Narratives woven around hearths served as both practice and passage. These stories served as guides, linking the collective past to each successive season. Through them, the art of survival portrayed the harsh years as opportunities for reflection. Storytellers became keepers of wisdom, weaving interpretations of mystical winters into the practical fabric of timeless adaptability. The people of medieval Europe, now long part of history's tapestry, left an echo in today's world. Their tales of survival remain to remind us of humanity's enduring resilience. Winter demanded more than just engineering survival. It called forth a concert of spirit and ingenuity still alive today. As these ancient individuals adapted and thrived amidst the chill, they bore the weight of challenging circumstances, weaving patterns from which our contemporary society can learn. This dance with winter, reminding us of perseverance and finding inspiring creativity through shared hardship, remains a resonant legacy. If you found the insights into this long-gone era intriguing, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that bring history's mysteries to life.